Hi Elkie, this is your lesson for Monday, and it is so complicated that I had to make a list of the things I wanted to talk about. But it's about She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. And what I did was I watched an episode called, I don't know the title, but it was about Adora and Catra. And apparently those are the main characters. And they seem to be, hello, can you see me? They seem to be two girls, like maybe 14, and they're like best friends, and then they get in a big argument, and they have to fight over the end of the world and terrible, evil people. They become enemies, and then at the end they're reconciled, and they embrace. And so, for lots of reasons, this was interesting to me, because for one, it reminds me of your friendship with Castle, because you were enemies, and then you became friends, and who knows, maybe you'll have to save the world and be enemies and friends again. I don't know. But my particular interest in it has to do with the way it's made. And in order to explain that idea, I have to tell you about going in a gallery one time, and the owner of the gallery, I'd never seen him before, and I'd never been there before, and he said to me, you know, I can tell that you're an artist. And I said, why? And he said, because artists, when artists come in the gallery, they look at the sides of the pictures. There's a painting on the wall. They don't look at the painting, they look at the side of the painting. Why would they look at the side of the painting? Because they're interested in how it was made, how it was created, whether it was a thick stretcher or a store-bought stretcher on a piece of plywood. They're interested in the mechanics of how it was created. So when I watch Adora and Catra and their cartoons, what occurs to me is, how did they make this? How did they create it? Because it's no different than a painting, because a painting is a flat surface on which there's lines and shapes, and yet we see things, and even things in the distance. And of course, difference between a painting and this, Adora and Catra, is they move around, and they run around, and they do things, and a painting is static. So already I'm off of the track on my list. But the second thing I want to talk about is my interest in this goes back to the 6th grade. Because in the 6th grade, I began to do drawings. My very first drawing was of this, Sylvester the cat. It was the first thing I ever set out to draw, and I memorized it just like you memorize things that you memorize, like you study it and you listen to it and then you duplicate it. And I duplicated this. The only thing is that my version of this, like, I don't like certain things about this because to me they did it wrong. And here is my version of it. Look like this. First I would draw this shape. Then I would draw the nose. Then I would draw the whiskers. But then I would put in what they left out, a tongue, like that. Then I would put in 3 dots, and then the whiskers. But then you'll notice that they drew this line like that, and I used to draw it like this. And they drew the entire oval of the eye like this, but mine used to be like this, wherein the nose blocked out the bottom of the eye. My eyeball was like this, and that was my Sylvester. And then, of course, I would color it in. Now, also mine had an arc like this to separate the colors, because this was flat. I got so good at this, and the kids in my class were envious of it, and I would sell to them, not the drawing, but the method of how to do it. I would like charge 25 cents and I would show them that what you have to do is you have to first memorize this shape, 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 and then you can do it. And then they would show me stuff, they would do stuff, and it would look like this. Here's what they would do. You see what I'm getting at here? The proportions would be completely wrong, and I wouldn't know how to explain it to them. In other words, if you write your name, it's like Richard. But this is still Richard, but this is not Sylvester. In other words, language, the shapes don't matter in the same sense that in drawing it does. Now I'm getting way, way off of what I want to talk about. So, I guess I better get to the subject of this. What I was wanting to do is, well, the next thing on my list is talking about Christmas, because it has to do with the next part of the drawing. At Christmas, I visited my sister Romy in Utica, and she has 2 daughters. And the daughters' husbands were there, and they were having a long conversation about work. And one of them said, they got so mad it was 11s. I said, what does that mean? What does it mean to say 11s? So he goes like this. He makes a face like this, and he scrunches up his face, and 2 lines appear right here, and he says, he didn't say anything, he just went like that. 11s apparently meant getting really mad. So I thought, what is an emojo like? Does an emojo show an 11? Actually, it doesn't. Emojos look like this for anger. That's anger. And anger is indicated by this. And of course, if you put this in, it still just makes it more exaggerated. I did find one emojo, and now I can't find it. I did find one emojo that looked like this. That was supposed to be anger. So I was thinking of this. In Adora and Katra, how do they show emotions in the drawings? And actually, I couldn't find exactly what I was looking for, but what I did find was how expressions change in the drawing. And believe it or not, I singled out 2 examples where the facial expressions go from one mood to another, and I wanted to copy it. And I checked the bottom where it gives the time, and I looked at 16 seconds and 17 seconds, and the whole facial expression change occurred in less than 1 second. So the only way I could make screenshots of it was, there's a little gear in the bottom right, click the gear, and it tells you the time that it goes as it progresses. And you can set it for 1/4 of the speed. In other words, 1 second takes 4 seconds to occur. So they go, "Hi, Adora, how are you?" like that. And so you can find, and it turns out that this cartoon series the images change about 4 times each second. So let's look at 1 second of Adora and Katra. We'll just use, and I'm going to shorten this a little bit. Here is, I believe, Adora. She has just heard something that bothers her. And in order to show that she's bothered, they do this. They bring that down. and her mouth is open but turns down. But notice also a couple other things. It's 3/4 view, so we cannot see her right ear. Look at the way the ear is drawn here. It's drawn, the inner part of the ear is drawn with this shape. That's that right there. And look at her eyeballs. She is looking, she's turned to the right and looking to the right. Now, 1/4 of a second later, she looks like this. Notice the change. Her eyebrows are still down, but she begins to look to the right. And notice how the ear changes. You see that it goes from this, excuse me a second, it goes from this to this because she's turning her head, and so the shape of the inner ear changes. Also notice this. Here is how much hair shows from her ear, and here's how much hair shows. Why would it change? Because as her head turns, the hair goes behind. Notice where her chin, the tip of her chin to the neck is right there. The tip of her chin to the neck is here. And that's in 1/4 of a second. One other thing I noticed that I want to point out, the color of the neck is always a tint, like we did with the white paint. A tint darker than the face. And that tint will show up, you're not going to see it in a video, but the tint shows up under the eyes as a shadow cast by the brow in every single image. Now, next comes, let's leave this up. At 1/2 a second, we see this. Now the chin has moved to here. Also here, notice too that we cannot see her ear over here. In this one, her ear appears, and then here, the ear becomes larger. Notice her mouth changes very slightly, and her eyeball moves to the right. Also, see this space of the hair. Now it's gone and appears on the other side because her head is shown to be turning. Lastly, we come to the end of this, and after this, when she arrives at this, when she's turned her head all the way around, and now the hair is all like the opposite of the first one, now she gets to a static place. In other words, she stops. Now her chin is lined up with the other side of the neck. Finally, at this point is where all the action occurs right here. She'll be talking for several seconds, and her mouth will be moving and moving and moving, but her head will stay exactly the same. Now, what does that got to do with you? Nothing. This is not an assignment. You got to do that 3 shades of purple painting that I asked you to do 2 weeks ago. And that is your assignment, and this is just because. So, see you Friday.